Welcome to Our Girl Relationships. On this channel, we talk about problems people face in their day-to-day life. Let's start with the video.
Me, 26F, and my boyfriend, 30M, have known each other for around 5 years. Before we started dating, he was my best friend. He moved into my neighborhood around the time when I was 21 and transferred to the same college as me. And so we bumped into each other a lot, and that led to us getting closer. I introduced him to my friends, and we started spending most of our days hanging around with each other, or with the rest of the friend group. Soon that friendship turned into something else. He would often show me kind gestures, like the time I found him waiting for me with a bouquet of flowers in hand after I finished an exam, or when he gave me his sneakers when my heels hurt my feet after a night partying. I saw how his gaze would linger far too long on my lips when we spoke. He was blunt, and he made it quite evident that he had something going on for me. Our other friends started to notice how he acted differently with me and started to tease me about it. On the other hand, I was too shy to admit that I also felt something for him, so I pretended to be oblivious to his flirting for the longest. In the meantime, he dated other girls, and it made me feel like hell. It's like I resented him for dating other girls when I was the reluctant one. After graduating, he told me he was moving out and that he'd go live in another city. At that moment, I felt so much regret because I didn't want him to leave, and also because I wasted what could have been between us. But I didn't expect him to ask me out to be his girlfriend like a 13-year-old would. He told me that he loved me and that he knew I had feelings for him too, and he then proposed that I move out with him. I was young and driven by my hormones, so I agreed to his request. I remember feeling on cloud 9 that day and texting all my friends and my parents to tell them the news. We actually moved out 3 months later and started to share a small apartment in the bigger city. Rent was expensive, even though we only lived in a 2-bedroom apartment, and so I insisted we split it between us. But he refused. He had that old-fashioned mindset that a man should never let his women pay for him. At that time, it was no big deal because his parents were rich and they'd send him a monthly income. He then found a job in his field that paid well and was enough to supply our needs, and so his parents felt it was high time to let him live independently. For my part, I struggled to find a job in the field in which I studied, and after a while, I had to settle for working in a hotel as a receptionist. Even if he managed to take good care of the house expenses on his own, I still didn't enjoy feeling useless, and I would have hated myself for taking advantage of his situation. We lived together for 3 years in perfect harmony. He would always come back home right after work, and we would spend the afternoon snuggling, or when I felt more energized, we'd do some outdoor activities. He particularly enjoyed hiking, and he'd force me to go with him in some deserted mountain at least once a month. But then this last year, things started to go south. I realized one day that we were late on our electricity bill. It was something he usually took care of, but I assumed he just forgot about it. Lately, he started spending more time at work. He got promoted. Therefore, he'd get called off suddenly to attend urgent work meetings. I concluded that all these new responsibilities overwhelmed him, and so I didn't think much of it. Afterward, I observed that he'd stopped spending a penny on household matters, and I thought I'd question him about it. What surprised me the most about our conversation was him saying that he was struggling financially, even though he recently got promoted. As far as my knowledge goes, every promotion is accompanied by a raise in salary. He told me that his firm was going through a hard time because of the pandemic, and that, as an act of compassion, demanded that he get paid less than what his position usually offered. I was stunned at his declaration, but wanted to be supportive nonetheless because if the company he was working for was in a precarious situation, it meant they would fire their employees at any time, and I didn't want this to happen to him. From there, I decided to get a part-time job to help him out. It's true that we didn't get to see each other much because of the situation, and by that I mean we'd only meet at night when I would be too exhausted to do anything other than sleep, but it was for the best. I really wanted to help us get through this, so I started paying for almost everything, including the bills and rent. Months passed and our financial situation didn't get better. My boyfriend started acting differently with me. He got cold and distant. On the weekends when I didn't work, he'd leave the house as soon as he woke up, and he'd only get back late at night. It pained me how our relationship was being threatened by that. And so I figured out I'd make the first move and surprise him after his shift ended with a gift. I went out shopping and bought him his favorite perfume and a notebook with our names engraved on its cover. Then I picked a random day of the week to park near his company and wait for him to come out. What I didn't anticipate was seeing him, all smiles, with his beautiful, very sexy coworker, hand draped around her waist and then embarking in her car to God only knows where. I didn't want to misread the situation. As suspicious as it seemed to be, I decided to follow them with my car to see where they would go. They stopped in front of a very high-end restaurant, the kind of place where you'd spend $300 on dinner. The thing is, despite my best efforts to not doubt my best friend, lover, the man I've known for 5 years now, the way he and his coworker acted together and the intimate touches they shared forced me to conclude he was cheating on me. I couldn't stand seeing more, and thus I went back home. It's been 2 weeks now since the incident, and he doesn't know I've seen him. He still pretends to be at work all the time. On the weekends, he pretends to be with his friends to meet. He's not even getting creative with his lies, since I have no proof that he's cheating on me, or that he's spending all his money on his new girl. I don't know what to do, and I'm tired of covering the expenses of a cheating boyfriend. So if any of you could advise me, I'd appreciate it. Update. So first, I'd like to thank you guys for all the comments and support you've shown me. It really means a lot to me. I couldn't bring myself to tell my friends or my parents about the situation because it's really embarrassing for me to admit that this relationship failed. So yeah, thanks again. I did like most of you suggested. I waited for him once again in front of his workplace. I made sure to rent a car this time so he wouldn't recognize me and followed him again on one of his dates. They went to a hotel this time and came back out of it approximately 3 hours later. I made sure to record them going in and getting out of it. I even caught them kissing on camera. And I repeated the process for the next 2 weeks. They went on several dates during those 2 weeks, and I had to hold back my tears as I took pictures of them kissing, holding hands, and laughing together. I also saw him taking her to luxury clothing stores and then going out with several shopping bags, and knowing him, he's probably the one who paid for each of the items they contained. When I felt like I had enough evidence, I showed him, and then I immediately broke up. I now moved out to a smaller apartment, and even if I'm hardly recovering from the heartbreak, I think I made the right choice. I, 26M, was in a cult between the ages 9 and 14. My family had always been religious, and my father was introduced to it by a coworker. It's probably like how you picture a cult. There was a leader who told us that he had solved secrets of Christianity, and we were the true believers. He disavowed all media and most modern technology, and over time there was more of a focus on limiting contact with people outside of the church. Knowing this, you can guess that things got bad for my family fast. Before long, I wasn't allowed to have the same friends who I'd had for years and had to go home immediately after school. I was only allowed to be home or at church, nowhere else. I can't remember how I felt at the beginning, but I got more frustrated when I entered middle school. My dad got more into the church. He would sell certain possessions of ours in order to give more money. Anything from our family's finer dishes and silverware to my own bike. Eventually, at 14, I walked in on my mom crying. She had always stood with my dad, but I learned she was just as miserable as me. We had a talk, and she agreed to confront my dad. Things were changing, or we were leaving. And it worked. I wasn't there, but I learned that when my mom confronted him, he broke down too. He'd become disillusioned with the church, but the other members told him that if he had become more devoted, our family would see the truth. We cut ties with him immediately, and since my dad did everything to apologize, he used to literally apologize constantly, and he also did things like take out loans for my college in his name. We weren't in a great financial situation after this, and he didn't want to burden me with debt. I've spent time in therapy and believe that while what he did to us was awful, he was also a victim. I feel very lucky that all three of us had a good relationship despite everything. When I was visiting recently, it came up that I told my girlfriend about the cult, and my dad got more upset than I've seen him in a decade. Not mad, just deeply upset, saying that there is no reason to bring it up now, that he thought we'd moved past it. I told him that we had, but it was still my history. We eventually moved on, but for the rest of the visit he seemed off. And it's really been bugging me. I know he's genuinely sorry, and I know it's very painful for him to think about other people hearing about him at his worst. But this just doesn't seem like something I should hide from important people in my life. I'm really torn. I don't want to hurt him. Am I the asshole? No a-holes here. You talking about it with someone you trust is fine and even necessary. Your dad seems to be in that awful spot of trauma recovery where any mention of the trauma feels like he's getting stabbed. It isn't pleasant, but I don't think anyone's an asshole. No a-holes here. If I were in your dad's place, that's definitely information I'd want to control and not share with everyone. You telling an outsider is scary for him. If it's something he's profoundly ashamed of, he's probably concerned about being judged by someone who's close to you. At the same time, your girlfriend is important to you, and you have the right to be truthful about your history, both for your own healing and for transparency in the relationship. The best you can do is reassure your dad that you know he's genuinely sorry and you love him. No a-holes here. While I haven't been in a cult, my father is similar to yours. He left me with my biological mother when I was 3 because he thought he wouldn't be a good father, especially since he was a young father. Then he finds out that she was abusive, so understandably he feels a lot of guilt. For him, if I would bring it up in front of someone, it was like I was attacking him. He just wanted to forget, but for me, whether he liked it or not, that is my background now. You just need to sit with your dad and explain what you said here. He's a victim like you are, and that you are not angry with him. He may never lose that guilt, but your reassurance would make him feel a little better about it. I am 19, have an older sister, F23, Jess, who has no contact with my parents after they had a huge fight with her at 17, and kicked her out to live with my now deceased aunt. The main reason of the fight is that Jess wanted to study abroad as her dream. But my parents refused to let her and took away her college money. She ended up going to a community college in another town after she moved away with her then boyfriend and now fiancé. I talk to Jess regularly but haven't seen her much, and I haven't told my parents that I talked to her, per her request. Unfortunately, a lot has happened this past year. Both my parents have terminal illness, and their health has been declining. Last week I found out that Jess is pregnant. I was so happy for her, but then I kept remembering my parents' words about how they wish to see at least one grandchild before they pass. I had an urge to tell them, and eventually I ended up telling them yesterday. They were overjoyed and wanted to speak to Jess to see if they could come see her. I called Jess to tell her how excited my parents were about her pregnancy, and asked if she wanted to meet up with them as they wanted to gift her baby stuff. She lost it on me, asking what was wrong with me to tell our parents about her pregnancy. I said it just happened and I didn't mean to snitch, but she said that it wasn't my info to share, nor did she give me the permission to share, which, yeah, she's right, but she didn't tell me I couldn't tell either. She started arguing with me about how I just messed up, and she has to bear the consequences. How she's already having a rough pregnancy and me sending our parents to her is going to make it worse. I apologized for causing her stress, but said that was none of my intentions. She cussed me out and hung up. I kept trying to call her back, but she's not responding. I spoke to her fiancé, and he sternly told me off for what I did. I figured I was being empathetic to my parents, who have been longing for a grandbaby, and being willing to reconcile with my sister. I'm too young to get married, let alone have kids, and knowing my sister is expecting literally warmed my parents' hearts. In my opinion, they sincerely wanted to reconcile. You're the asshole. If Jess didn't want contact, you should have respected that. Your parents kicked her out when she was 17. Dude, no wonder she's upset at you. You have tons of sympathy for your parents who have terminal illness, and I get it. There was a better way through this, which would have been to tell your sister about the terminal illnesses and suggest that she reach out and let her have that choice. Where was your empathy for your sister? You had none. I hope you apologize profusely to your sister. You're the asshole. You took her life into your hands because you felt bad for your parents. It wasn't your place. Not even just figuratively, but literally. She's already having a rough pregnancy, and OP just tossed two of the biggest stressors in her life directly at her. Pre-eclampsia almost killed my mother. It did kill my brother, who she was pregnant with and ended up being stillborn, and it left her with lifelong chronic diseases, one of which requires her to have a catheter 24/7. OP has put her and her child's life at serious risk. All to what? Warm the cold hearts of two people who are already terminal and stole all of her college savings 6 years ago, right before kicking her, an underage teenage girl, out and completely cutting her off. OP just showed his hand, and I doubt his sister is going to let somebody who obviously cared more about using her baby as a sacrificial support animal to bring a moment of false happiness to their abusive parents more than he cared about ensuring he didn't do anything to jeopardize this baby's life and her own health and safety around her vulnerable infant. OP just ruined his own chances at ever getting to know this kid, all for nothing. Nice job, OP. Kiss away your last chance to be an uncle, because now you'll not only lose your parents within the next year or so, but you've also lost your sister. I don't see her ever forgiving you for this. You're the asshole. It wasn't your place to decide. You made this reunion conditional because the only reason they wanted contact with her is because she's having a child. Intentionally. You even stated you had the urge to tell them and then made a conscious decision to tell them the news. You didn't even ask your sister if you could. You decided on your own. It's been 6 years. If they were so ill at any point, they could have reached out to her because they genuinely wanted to reach out to her. Now she has the stress of dealing with them during her pregnancy, and you made the situation worse with total disregard for her health. Massive, you're the asshole.